Hi, welcome to COM 2026. Today we're going to continue on the topic loops. If you haven't watched our while loop video, I would suggest you to go through the while loop first. For loop is another loop that can help us to execute a loop for a predetermined number of times. A for loop will have a very similar syntax as a while loop. The loop body should be embraced by the curly bracket. A for loop has three parts in its declarations. The first part is called the initial expressions. The second part is called the condition. Third part is called post iterations actions. In the following example, you can see we first declare I equals 0 in the initial expressions, and then we have conditions very similar to the while loop, I less than 10, and we have I plus plus here. This entire code will be executed for 10 times. The values of I is increment from 0 to 9 until the condition I is not less than 10. We go deeply into the syntax of for loop and understand each part of these. The first part is called initial expression. This part is only executed for once at the beginning of our loop. It tries to declare and initialize a counter variables. As you can see, for most of the loops, we use a variable called the counter variable. This is exceptionally useful. The second one we call a condition. The condition is works very similar as a while loop. Okay, it's going to be evaluated before the execution of the loop, even for the first time. Post interactions will be taken after each iteration of the loop body. It's usually used for the update the counter variables. Now, looking at the example that we have introduced previously and see how it works. Initially, we have the loop entered and we first execute the first part, 1, which is initial expression. Okay, so we declare the variable I and set it as 0. The second part will be checking the condition. Because I equals 0, so it must less than 10. The condition is fulfilled. And we execute the loop body B. So the value of I, which is 0, is print. Then we go to the post interactions, where increment the value I by 1. So I plus plus here, we have I equals to 1. Okay? And then we check the condition again. 1 is less than 10. We continue with our loop body, printing the 1, and then I plus plus. We have, remember, after loop body, we execute the post iteration actions, I plus plus, which make I from 1 to 2, and keep going until we have the values of I equals to 9. 9 is less than 10. Okay, so 9 is less than 10. We execute this statement, we print the value of 9. And what is happening is we will do the post interaction after the loop body. Okay, after B we have 3, right? Every B we have a 3. So we increment the value of I, which is 9, to 10. Now, 10 is no longer less than 10. So we simply exit the loop, as here. Okay, so 2, B, 3, and we actually need to go through a 2 again, but that 2 is not fulfilled anymore, so we exit the loop. In the second example, we can see here, we are not doing I plus plus, but we use a little bit weird syntax that I plus equals to 2. If you remember this one, what does that mean? That means I equals to I plus 2. Okay, so in this example, we have I equals 0, I less than 5, I plus equals to 2. And we also have a one-line loop body here. Initially, we have I equals to 1, I equals 0, sorry, I equals 0. And then we check the condition, which is true. Then we go to here, okay? So B loop body, and then the post iteration, uh, um, the post iterations, I plus equals to 2. So that makes our loop become 2. Okay, sorry, make our I becomes 2. So the next one, we're going to check 2 less than 5. Well, this is true. So we print the other one. Okay, okay, I equals to 2. And then we come back here to the post iteration actions. 2 plus 2 equals to 4, so I equals to 4. 4 is still less than 5, so we print this one. And then the post iterations, so we update the value of I becomes 6. Now 6 is not less than 5 anymore, so we exit the loop. Now, so if this is possible, please help me to count number of times that each of the following loops is executed. For the first one, we start with I equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, until the last value, I equals to 59. When I equals to 59, we still enter this loop, and then the value of I becomes 60. 60 is not less than 60. So this is basically what it's doing is it will be stop the loop. So the loop execution will be from I equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 60. There are total 60 times of hello printed out. For the second loop, I start with the value 1. The ending condition is the same. So I ends when I reach to 59. Okay? The last values that we're going to print, the last value for I that we're going to enter the loop is I equals to 59. When I equals 60, we don't do that. We don't do this line. So there are totally 59 times of hello were printed in the second loop. In the third loop, that will be 61. The reason is when I equals 60, we will still enter the loop. While I equals 61, we exit the loop. So the total number of times that we're printing is from I equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 60. That will be 61 times. And the last one, as you may know, it has 60 times of hello print. So if you want to repeat something for a predetermined number of times, we usually will write a loop in this way. We start with I equals 0, the counter is 0, and then the number of times that you want to repeat the code. So 60 means you want to repeat for 60 times. In for loop, the variable declared in the initial expressions has a scope within the loop only. Now, we haven't really talked about the terms scope yet, but please bear with me. If we have a scope saying that it is only visible inside a loop, what that means is outside the loop, we can't access the variable I. Okay? So you can see after this for loop, we can't print the value of I because I is declared inside the for loop. Now, if you want to have this kind of variable outside the loop, what you could do is to declare the variable outside the for loop, like here, int I equals 0, and then nothing in the declarations, and then so on. Now you can also just simply put I equals 0 in the first part in the initial expressions. Okay, that is also acceptable, but please don't declare I again. Otherwise, you won't be able to uh, use this variable outside the loop. You can, in the previous example, you can see we can skip, we can omit any part, the initial expression. In fact, we can omit any part of the expressions in for loop. So, for example, this one, we can omit the initial expression. We do not declare the variable here. We do not initialize it here. Okay. Now that will give you a problem if you really compile this one, because I we don't have an initial value, so I plus plus or I less than 4 would be a problem. The second line, we declare a variable and we have a condition here. This is totally fine, but we don't have a post iteration action. Now, in this case, it means that we don't do anything after each of the iteration. This is acceptable. Now, the last one, we say we don't have a condition. We don't have an initialized expression. We don't have a post iteration action, which is fine. This expression is the same as while true. Now, if it is the same as while true, you must put a break inside this loop. Otherwise, you will create an infinite loop. Okay? Now, we could also put more than one expression in each part of the loop. So for instance, you can define multiple variables in a for loop if they have the same type. int I equals 0, comma j, that is acceptable. Two variables I and j are declared. I has an initial values, j does not. You can have a condition with a more complicated logic by joining the Boolean values with and or operators. So for instance here, it suggests the loop will be executed for 3 times for user incorrectly enter their password. After 3 times, the loop does not do anything. The last one is a post iteration action. Okay, we could have more than one post iteration actions in our loop. So for instance, we can increment the value I by 1, decrement the value j by 1 in 2 different statements. You should avoid multiple expression in initial expression or post iteration actions, which can be rewritten in some other formats if you are not really familiar with this writing. Okay, so try to avoid this one if you are not really familiar with this one. Next, we're going to talk about something called the enhanced for loop. Enhanced for loop is used to traverse an array or an innumerables. Sometimes it's also known as for each loop. Okay, we will revisit this one again when we have array and innumerables like vectors and list. So basically the syntax is we declare your variables and then followed by a colon which pointed to an array or innumerables. Take a look at this example. We say int I colon array. What that means? It means now assume you have you must have heard about array in your previous programming course. So in this array, well, we haven't really talked about the array syntax in Java, but please bear with me. This is an array. Okay, each of the elements inside the array will be taken out sequentially and assigned to the value I. So the value I will be here. I used to we're going to print the value 2026 sequentially. Okay, we don't know how many times it has been executed, but we know we will list out every element inside the array. Okay. Now the syntax will be a declaration of your variable. We have to declare exactly one variable. That variable has to have a compatible types with the array and enumerable. So for example, this is a double. You can't put an int here, okay? It has to be compatible. And the second part, this array or enumerable will be the things that you can look through, okay? And then we can use that variables inside the loop body. Now, uh, so you will see it is much more useful when we want to process on all elements inside an array, okay? It will be running that in a sequential order, first to last order. It is more simple, but will be less flexible because we can't simply jump a value. We can just immediately jump to the last one, okay? And the variable itself is copied by value, is not by reference, which means whenever the values of the counter variables is changed, okay, if you change the counter variable inside your loop body, that would not affect your array or enumerables. And we don't know the syntax, sorry, we don't know the index of your current elements. What does that mean? That means that for each inside the enhanced for loop, you don't know which elements you are operating at. You only know the values of it. Now, you may find this page a little bit difficult to understand without the context of array, without deep understanding about reference or values copy. So we won't really put this part into the quiz. Okay? Now you can see we can write the loop in different methods. So for example, this one, this is the for loop, this is a while loop. Both of them express the same logic. The initial part, we just take it out before the loop. The post iteration actions is placed at the last statement inside the loop. So basically these two lines will be equivalent. Both of them will be print I for 5 times. This one serve the same one, okay? Where if the values here, number percent %I equals 0, will break the loops. And in these two while loops, the loop will be break if this statement is not, if this statement is not true, okay? Which means when num percent %I equals to 0, it breaks. Again, these 4 examples tells the same logic, but it's written in different methods. We have a do while loop, we have a while loop, we have a while loop here, we have another while loop here. Some of them are using breaks, some of them doesn't. Okay? So which one is better? Well, they're equivalent. Okay? Which one looks better is the better one. Okay? Which one looks better to you, that will be the better one for you. So how do we choose the right loop? When we're going to use the for loop? When we're going to use the while loop? There is no absolute answer for that. But usually we have a rules if we know how many times that a loop will need to use. We could use for loop, okay? And also, when the number of iteration of executes is important, we use for loop, okay? And if you really need a counter variable, we use for loop. Well, if you don't know how many times you're going to execute, probably while loop or do while loop will be more useful. So simply use the cleanest and simplest one for if more than one type of loop can solve the problem. Okay, that's your choice. So today we have go through for loops and enhance the for loop. I hope that will do something for you. Okay. I shall see you next time when we go to the next topic, nested loop. Goodbye.